Well, happy Friday to you. It's been another interesting week. I am today in the business of geospatial going to talk about some big geospatial news and my reflections. Um, Something fascinating happened this week. That happened. So Pixel8.Earth was acquired by Snapchat or Snap. Um, Now I know Sean Gorman, who's one of the founders of that company, and Sean and I talk quite a lot. Second company that Sean sold his first company with others to Esri, and now we've got another acquisition that Sean's been involved with. This is a big deal. This is a big deal not only to Snap, it's obviously a big deal to Sean's team, but it brings the world of GIS and where Sean actually came from somewhat to the consumer focused world. So we're seeing these overlaps. But to me, the key thing here is actually Sean himself, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this. Sean's a guy who's got a PhD. He's very, very technically savvy, but he's also very business savvy. And he's got both of these things going on. And that's kind of where my talk is going to go today, actually. So I'm going to take a slight tangent, but on that theme of somebody like Sean, who has both the technical gifts and the business gifts. So my belief is, and you've heard me say this before, that we live in a very disconnected world within geospatial. We got the Geospatial 1.0 world, which I've spoken about, and I'll generalize and say that's the map generation pattern world. That's not only GIS, that's remote sensing. It's where we have experts in the middle who take data, so they get a problem, they take data, they find the right data, they use expert desktop tools, and they output a map. It's a generalization, but that's been the long 50-year history really of geospatial, and a chunk of you watching this, myself included, have come or been part of that world. I've written a lot about Geospatial 2.0. It's really hard to pin down exactly what we're talking about here, and these are convenient labels, but this is the emerging world of geospatial. It isn't necessarily paired with remote sensing GIS, even though in some cases that's in the background. This is very much more focused on the new data that we're collecting from these miniaturized sensors. So that could be satellites, that could be in aeroplanes, in drones, terrestrial, it's LiDAR, it's IoT. So a lot of data is being collected. We're also now processing that data with artificial intelligence and machine learning. So this is the brand new world that we're entering, inherently geospatial. You'll hear a lot about space and Earth observation. There's money pouring in there. Again, we're looking down on the ground. Earth observation is not just about satellites. It's looking at the Earth at different levels, but it's collecting data, processing data to answer questions. A lot of money going into the space economy as well. There's the money. Venture capital and private equity, particularly venture capital, is pouring into the geospatial world, particularly into the 2.0 world. But I've mentioned in other conversations that there are now acquisitions going on within the 1.0 world. GIS Inc. were purchased just recently, and they're very much a 1.0 company. So there's really interesting activity in the venture world and in the private equity world, very much focused on geospatial. That's new, and that's only getting bigger. And if you subscribe to the newsletter, there's some fascinating announcements. Sean's announcement is just really one of those, not private equity, but it's a company purchase. But again, folks being purchased. Then you've got these national, international geospatial organizations, and there's lots of them. There's organizations like the OGC, there's NGOs, there's big organizations, there's a World Bank, there's big organizations which again are fundamentally trying to tackle geospatial problems on all continents. So we've got all these different groups, and we have customers. So I see the world of geospatial as being extremely disconnected. There's the traditional space that a lot of us have lived in, the 1.0 world. There's the emerging 2.0 world, and then there's all these different groups which have vested interest in what really is fundamentally geospatial. And I always say, people forget what geospatial means. It means a place on the Earth. It's a study of location-based data, but geospatial is place on the Earth. And I'm a geographer, so I love that. So what are the geospatial challenges? I mentioned this on a Wednesday call. We've got lots of echo chambers. We've got echo chambers in the existing 1.0 world. We've got the Kool-Aid drinking you hear a lot about. You've got these circular conversations that are just bouncing off one another. They've been conversation we've been having for the longest time. A lot of it's centered on, and I'll just bring up the other piece here. A lot of it's centered on data and technology. So echo chambers in the old world, they focus on data, technology, and products. And now we're seeing the emergence of new echo chambers in the 2.0 world. Again, still that same focus, which is problematic. We're also, and Will Cadell mentioned this last week in GeoIgnite, we're still focused on this. I mean, geospatial has challenges because we are very horizontal. I mean, we can solve, I mean, if we're talking about people and places, which is at sort of at the core of geospatial, we can solve problems everywhere. I mean, we're sort of this horizontal solution, if you like. But what Will says, and I totally agree with him, is that we really need focusing in specific areas. We need actually to say, this is a value to the guys in the finance world. This is a value to the guys in the insurance world. This is a value to the guys in the agricultural world. So the conversation needs to be focused in particular areas, because what we're really doing is trying to broaden the message to a much wider group than our own echo chambers and our own folks that get the value. We're talking about a new group that don't get it, and that's a huge group. We do a lot of talking amongst ourselves. I mean, that's massively problematic. Again, I think that the whole idea of GIS priesthood and geospatial priesthood, we talk to one another. We like to talk about all the things that we're interested in, but frankly, nobody outside of our echo chambers is that interested. So we've got to work, we've somehow got to bring those other folks into the conversation, and that means different conversations. We are also highly challenged on complex problems. I look at, and I'm not pointing fingers here. It's just an example that came up in a conversation earlier today. The Geospatial Commission have got an initiative around underground data. Underground data is really complicated. If we start thinking about climate change, that's hugely complicated, and it's really relevant here. But there is low-hanging fruit that we can actually really focus on, that we can actually solve relatively quickly. It doesn't involve conversations around we can't get the data. I was talking to a guy that worked for a big management consulting company, and he said they built a unit inside of their organization to consult with companies around the use of geospatial data. They didn't get very far with it because what the companies wanted and what they promised wasn't available. How do we get around that? How do we get to a place where we know what's available? It isn't a conversation around data that is too expensive today, but in 3 years' time it will be cheaper, like I mentioned in my last Friday talk. It isn't a conversation around technology that's not there yet or that's immature. We hear a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning. There's a lot of immaturity in that marketplace. So when you dig deeper, some things can't be done. Some promises can't be met. So what promises can be met with what we've got? And how do we get in those conversations which are very focused, that are value centric? So we know we can get there. That's a commercial conversation. It is no longer a conversation around data and technology. It's very much what can we do today to help you in these different sectors solve the problems that you've got. So low-hanging fruit. Now let me get to the proposed solution. Now again, I've hinted at this a couple of times, and I've spent probably close to a year now really kind of ultimately arriving at this place. So I've been talking to people in the traditional 1.0 world, and I know that world super well. I've been talking to people in the 2.0 world who are new, and the startups, folks that are in artificial intelligence, folks that are in Earth observation. I've been talking to big organizations, big international bodies, small international groups. And again, people in the venture capital community. I've actually just become a board member of a venture capital private equity company to help them, advise them on sort of geospatial. But this disconnected world and this lack of, dare I say, ability to, and I'm holding on here because I haven't brought the slide up here, this lack of commercial centric focus is, I think, in part because we are not connected together. And I'm exploring a global geospatial accelerator. Now, there are accelerators out that are very regional. The one that is in the works that I am exploring with others is slightly different model to some of those, but there are lots of elements. We'll take all of the successful pieces from existing accelerators and move this into this other one. So it's work in progress, but it's very much the focus is on how do we connect some of these dots. Again, I've mentioned the fact that I'm a geographer and I see geographers as connecting dots. This is essentially what this global geospatial accelerator would be, is to bring those worlds together, those important players together in the same room, and to stop us living in this disjointed world, and for us to actually start really seriously thinking about how we mentor how we commercialize, how we move the data and the technology that we've got that's new into a place where we can actually solve problems today and not focus on 3 years time, but what can we do today to bring in those that have clear problems that need solving that we can help them solve. And it's going to be a group effort, it's going to be a connected effort. So that's what I've been working on, that's what I've been hinting about. More to come on that in the coming days and weeks. So I'm excited about it. It seems to be a massive need. And again, after a year of having thousands of conversations, I've arrived at a conclusion that this is really what's needed at the minute. There's a massive gap, and it needs to be built. So that's what I've been involved with. So thanks for listening to the Friday talk. I go on my soapbox a little bit sometimes. I don't mean to, but you can tell I feel passionate about these things. If you got, please feel free to leave some comments in LinkedIn, or send me an email at matt.sheehan@yofthere.com, and I'll do another Friday talk next week. Have a nice weekend.